Hi, guys. Um, Viola, thank you for asking me to speak. I know we tried this once before, it didn't quite work out, but I'm really, really grateful to be here. I'm feeling super emotional, so it's good I have to wear glasses now to see all your faces because I don't want to look like I'm just dribbling here. Um, I'm so grateful for these Zoom meetings. I mean, this is incredible. And I want to thank everybody who's left their cameras on for me so I can see you. um, so, experience, strength, and hope. I've been around for a while, so it is good for me to remember, what it used to be like for me too. Although I don't stay in there very long. But I mean, I'm someone that I think that my biggest problem has always been honesty and even being honest about who I really am. And so a lot of that had to, there was a lot of subterfuge and needing to hide and wanting to pretend to be somebody else. I've had a love of alcohol since I was very, very, very young. I remember there's a lot of alcoholism in my family and in my extended family. And when I was little, mom and dad would drink beer sometimes. I didn't like the taste of beer, but they'd make cocktails every once in a while, these old fashions. And I clearly remember, I would sit at my dad's knee and like I'm two and begging, can I have a sip? Can I have a taste? Taste, please. And loving it. I loved everything about it. And as I got a little bit older, I used to mix drinks for my grandparents when they came to visit. And it was grandpa was Scotch on the rocks and grandma was 7 and 7. And boy, did I love that 7 and 7. And I would make the drinks, drink about half of it, fill it up again, and then take it out to them. That's like I'm 6 and 7 there. And it's just, I loved it. And it's everything about it. If it had still been working for me, I would probably still be drinking. Absolutely 100%. But it obviously stopped working. One thing I did learn fairly early on is at a family wedding. And I come from a big family, 10 kids, and a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles. And there was a family wedding where it was at this really cool place. It was an old convent that had been converted to an event space. And we didn't call it event spaces back then, but whatever. And they had the punch bowl for the kids on the same table with the champagne and everything for adults. And so my brother and I, who was my best buddy alcoholic and 1 year older than me, we would put a little punch in our cups and then champagne. And both of us got really pretty drunk at that wedding. I remember trying not to fall over as I walked on the pavers in the yard. And the next morning, we had something else going on. It was, wedding, there's another event. And my brother was really, really sick. And I was not. And, it was discovered that he had been drinking at the reception and he got in so much trouble. So, it's like, all right, I love drinking and do not get caught, And I carried on that way for quite a while. I mean, if there was a chance for me to sneak a drink, I would. It didn't really, and I will say this for, being an alcoholic, I do know there's a tendency, we abuse a lot of different things. We can shift our what we're using. So, food was also part of my story, as was anorexia in high school. It was another way of controlling things. And, so I had a pretty wide path there. Alcoholism, though, didn't really take off for me because I also had a big fear of authority, the don't get caught. And so even though I did drugs, I didn't do that many because I really was deathly afraid of getting caught. And that's also another part for me. I don't know how many of you are like this. It's really like the outsides really have to look together. I have to look like things are going fine. I am smart. I am doing everything I need to do, and I am okay. So to get caught, like, arrested or pulled over for time, it's like, no, we're not doing that. We're locking it down. So, but alcohol just seemed a safer option for me. And after I turned 21, my drinking really took off because, of course, now I didn't have to use a fake ID. I didn't have to sneak it. I could buy it and pretend I was having a party. So, so what started to happen is that I would be drinking in the evenings, coming home and, getting something to drink and drinking all evening. And then I started to drink during the day more and more. And it was, first it was, after work, some of the guys would, they'd be having a couple of drinks. I'd hang out and have the drinks with them. And then it evolved into, because I also thought that you could not smell vodka. If I'm drinking vodka, that was my drink of choice, you couldn't smell it. So I would start mixing vodka in in orange juice or some other juice they were selling. And I'd have it on my desk, like, this is just some healthy drink. And then I started pouring shots of Jack Daniels and putting them in one drawer of my desk and having sips of Jack Daniels all afternoon and keeping a stick of, peppermint gum on my desk so I could chew gum as soon as someone came in. And it sounds kind of crazy, and I'm really shocked people didn't see it happening, but I was pretty good at hiding my drinking. And what started to happen, because for me, control, as you may have guessed, was super important to me. And I was getting to the point where I was not able to keep it locked down anymore. I wasn't able to hide it the way I needed to hide it. And I was missing more and more days of work where I would call and just, oh my God, have such a bad head cold. I have such bad allergies. I'm going to be late. Constantly, and it was just, my life really felt like it was spinning out of control. And I was studying martial arts at the time, and my brother was running the dojo. I wasn't that high up in the ranks yet, but because he was, I would go out after the Thursday night class. I'd go out with all the black belts and we'd have drinks at the bar. What a great group. It was too. But I noticed there was one woman who was a black belt, and she was hilarious. And so, I just thought she was great and so funny and hanging out with everybody. And it took me a while, because we're pretty self-obsessed, to realize that she wasn't drinking. We'd all be drinking. She was not drinking. And I asked her about it one time. I'm like, why aren't you drinking? You don't drink? And she said, no, I'm not. I'm an alcoholic. I'm sober. And I was like, what? Because you can't, I had heard there was such a thing as sobriety. I'd heard that there was such a thing as not drinking, but I really, really, really did think that my life would just be over if I didn't have alcohol and or drugs, I just didn't think there was any way to do it. What do you do? So, I just kept expanding everything. Well, how do I go to a party? How do I can't toast champagne at my own wedding. How do I, all this silly stuff just would go in my head. So I started hanging out with her more and more, and we became pretty close friends. And I have to say, she is the thing that allowed me to start seeing some hope that there was a way to do this life. without using. And so I started going to meetings, and for me, I struggled for a couple of years, very slippery, slipping in and out, slip. But I kept coming back because I had started to build some friendships. And I think for me, and this, I don't know, in my story, like I said, the food was also a part of it. I found that because I'm also in OA, Overeaters Anonymous, I found that I couldn't get my drinking under control when I was still binging and purging or doing whatever I was doing in that other area. So for me, it kind of, I had to get that under control, and then I was able to also stop the drinking. And they have always pretty much gone hand in hand for me, although they're very different the way I live them. And that set me on my way. And the first thing I did when I knew I was serious now about being sober and staying that way is I got a commitment at a meeting, because I am a good girl and I'm going to do what you tell me to do. And that seemed to be what the cool kids were doing. They were getting a commitment, and I did get I had a lot of sponsors in the beginning. And I tell you that commitment, I will say for anyone, even if you're not new, there's something about, I think the first commitment I had was actually being the liaison between, it's like I'd go to these meetings and come back to the meeting and tell what was happening on the bigger level. And it was like a once a month commitment, but I didn't think of it that way. I showed up every week at that meeting, and it gave me a sense of being responsible to somebody other than myself for my sobriety, like, oh no, they're going to wonder where I am, or and it really helped me to get through those early days, especially with those days where I'm, it's like I hadn't been through all the steps yet, but I had this basket of tools that I had begun to pull close to me. And one of them was writing, and I just like make it home without stopping at a liquor store by the skin of my teeth, and then just start writing like crazy in my journal, like, what the fuck is going on? What is happening? Why am I so angry? What am I so angry about? To try to find out what all these feelings were that I'd been hiding for so long, that I'd been pushing down for so long, and it was a crazy, crazy process, and it worked, and if it was really bad, I'd call someone, and one thing I really love about this program is that there's no right way to do it. And there's certainly no one way, no 100 different ways to do it. You do it the way that works for you. And for me, I knew, first off, I had to figure out a higher power that I could trust, because I did not trust the one I was raised with. And it was certainly not any entity I wanted close to me or supporting me in my life. So I had to really work on creating a higher power that I could relate to, and that I felt confident in, and that I've really been able to be held by all these years. And it's also allowed me to, AA and the way it's presented and structured has allowed me to kind of explore different paths, and not to have to find something that someone else tells me is right, and that, has taken a lot of prayer and meditation and seeking, and I will say, I did get, like I say, I tried a few different sponsors. I finally ended up with one. I found that I could not be with someone that told me this is what you need to do, or else I'm not sponsoring you. I had to find someone who just held me in her hands and not held me, and I've been with her now. I found her finally when I was like 3 years sober. We've been together for 30 years now. So that's been a long time that relationship has really worked. And, as with everything else in my sobriety, our her and I, our relationship has grown and changed over the years, as has everything that I do, you know. And that's the thing too with this program. It really gives you the permission to evolve and find out what works for you. What worked for me in the early days wouldn't necessarily work for me now, or maybe didn't work 10 years ago, but now it does again. And to open your heart and be open to new ideas, something else that might work better now. I will say, take a drink just a second. I was thinking about this the other day because there is also a lot of, not a lot, but some depression that also runs in my family. And I think that probably kind of goes hand in hand with the alcoholism. You know, we love to self-medicate. But my sister was telling me about a niece that's been, and this is a sister who, she's out of the 10 kids, she's the only other one of us who is sober. She just got sober like 2 years ago. So I'm so proud of her. But she was telling me about her daughter who just got diagnosed as manic depressive, you know, and we were talking about that a little bit. And, you know, I thank God I don't have something that serious, but I will say, and I've never had a depression that had to be medicated or anything like that. But what shocked the hell out of me was at 2 years sober, and here everything is going great. I love my sponsor. I love my meetings. I'm doing great. I'm doing well at work. I'm learning to live in honesty and work in the steps. And I fell into the darkest depression I'd ever been in. And it was, I mean, I'm sure it was a situational depression, but it lasted for like 6 months. And just to have on the surface where things should be fine, you know, that was how I lived. That was my credo. You know, if I look good on the outside, it's okay. Where everything should have been fine. And I literally could not see color. It was like things were just black and white. It was just gray. It was just gray. And you know what, though? I went to more meetings. I talked about it, you know, talked about it, not necessarily sharing it at every meeting because people will be like still with the depression, you know, but I talked about it with people I knew and I trusted. And it's just like, this is still happening. I don't know what to do. And we tried different things. And it was just like, and you know what? It passed. And I don't know that it was anything I did or didn't do, but you know what? I stayed sober and it passed. You know, things pass, they do. And, you know, I've known people that had to be medicated for depression, and that's different. I really think this was just, well, now in hindsight, I can tell you what might have been going on because turns out I'm gay, surprise. But that I didn't find out until I was like 8 years sober, you know? But I think that depression hit me because there was still this big thing in my life that I just wasn't recognizing, ready to deal with, you know? And I think it came out in another way, you know? I don't know. All I know is it passed and I got through it because of this program and the people I had begun to gather around me. So yeah, I'm going along my merry way in this program, and it actually came up in an inventory because my sponsor, we don't do it so much anymore, but in the early years of working with her, you know, and I'm a strong believer in working through all the steps, and that was a revelation, and it changed the way I live my life. And I really do these steps are incorporated in my very being. I live the steps. But we would, rather than just doing little 10th steps, and a 10th step is where you just kind of check in on, usually it's a certain issue, or maybe someone you're having a problem with, you doing some writing about it, share about it, and then deal with that problem, you know? But we would do a full, like a 4th step every year, an annual 4th step. And it came up in one of my annual fourth steps where it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm probably bisexual. I don't know. And just, just talking about it. And she's like, huh, have you ever thought, I mean, maybe you are gay. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not going to go like experiment because that doesn't seem right to the other person. It doesn't, all this, it's just like, that doesn't seem right, and also the other thing too, there's so many things in these rooms that we hear that start to feel like they're part of the program, but they really aren't. They're just things that have been helpful for people over the years. Like don't date anyone in your first year of sobriety. Well, okay, it's not a rule. I can see why it came to be, because when you're when you're with somebody else, all of your stuff comes up, and we're just dealing with staying sober this first year, But anyway, I mean, I came in and I was with somebody. So, okay, that one's no. But, so it's your own program. You work it how you can work it, and hopefully with the help of a sponsor when you're especially new. But anyway, so I was like, I can't go experimenting around. And I just kept on going along with this. I was, had been in a long-term relationship with a guy at the time. And it was like, well, he's okay. I'm doing this constantly doing a balance sheet of, well, this is good, not so good, but you know what? The good is still outweigh, it's those kind of relationships. So I stayed with him, and finally, we ended up getting married. And at that point in my life, I was kind of like, well, I'd rather be, because I was I think I was 30 then. I'd rather be, divorced, having been married, than never been married, because everyone thinks that's weird. So that's my thinking. And, that was like a long time ago, but that's sober thinking. So anyhow, but the minute we got married, then it was like, for me, I had to take that step before I'm like, yeah, no, that wasn't it. And, he was a very good friend. I still count him as a friend, but it was like, no, we need to be not doing this. And, he was funny. He's like, but you could bring a girlfriend over. That would be fine with that. He's like, no. So anyhow, that ended, and I started figuring out who I really was, and dating. And I tell you it's funny because and I will say, I made vague reference to, I hate vagaries, but I do it a lot when I'm at a big meeting. But I was raised Catholic, and it's like, that is a no-go. And when I finally figured out that I was actually gay and not just probably bisexual, although I've never tried anything. When I finally figured it out, I was like, this is great news. I figured it out. I'm calling my family. Guess what? And it didn't go over so great. My sisters were cool. My parents were really great, but my brothers all have a big issue with it. And it's like, they can't let go of this idea of who they thought I was. And still to this day, some of them have a big problem. And now I've been like, my gosh, Ellen and I have been married for 20 years this year. So, yeah. And 2 kids. And, but it's just like the relief of finally figuring out this other big part of myself that I hadn't been willing to see clearly. I hadn't been ready to see clearly, was huge for me. And I will say, when I, and my wife is also, she's sober, which is huge, because it's funny, we were talking about it just the other night, that I was thinking back to people, because it came up with my sister. I was thinking back to people when I had dated people that were not sober, and it could be really difficult. Really, it could be problematic, because I never dated anyone who was a big drinker when I was sober. But if they drank a little bit, they were like overly like aware of the fact I wasn't drinking. And is this going to bother you? And it's just like, it's not, fine. Okay. But, or they didn't understand it and thought I could drink, or thought it was just a short-term thing, or, oh yeah, but then when you're better, then you can start drinking again. And I will say, even though my parents have both passed now, but even though I love my parents, my dad, to the day he died, was still, when I would come to visit him, he's like, so you want some wine? Oh, you're still not doing that? Are you sure? Because it's good wine. It's this thing. And I'm just like, no, Dad, not doing it. But anyhow, to be in this relationship with someone who's also on the same path, as she's on her own path, but I mean, who knows about sobriety and who's not afraid of it or trying to get me off of it. It's like, it's so wonderful to have that. And I thank goodness, because also as my life was changing, we got kids and things started getting really busy. It was, I wasn't able to go to as many meetings as I did. There were times, I'm sure many of you have done this, where it's like, you know what, I'm just getting 30 meetings in 30 days, or 90 meetings in 90 days, or, doing, being of service in like 3 different meetings every week. And that kind of that very busy AA life wasn't working when I was so busy with 2 young kids. And so, things really switched up. And, it's so nice to be in this meeting, because right now through COVID, I've been doing regular meetings with my sponsor and her group of sponsees, but I certainly haven't gone to a meeting. But it's been so great to have Zoom and to have that meeting still, that's so comfortable and strong. These women, I've known them for like 20 years, all of them at least. And also, oh wow, I only have quite a little while to go here. Other things in my life, I still, I say honesty has always been a big one for me. I still will catch myself wanting to act as if things are fine when they're not, and not really being honest about that. And it's interesting, because I find myself, I start acting squirrely, like, whether it's, lately it's just been a project that I'm working on that I've been having trouble really finishing it. And, Ellen's like, how'd it go today? Oh, great. Really good. Yeah. Like, it takes me a couple of weeks to say, you know what, it's really shitty and hard, and I can't do it. I'm really struggling with it. And, and it's, one more time when I just am willing to be totally who I am and honest, and, it just is such a relief, and it feels so much better. And then I'm able to go back to whatever it was I was avoiding or having trouble with, and come at it with a different perspective, and a different attitude. Family has always, it's interesting, because I've got a few minutes, and family has been really up for me lately. And I've had, this very changing and shifting relationship with my family. As we were growing up, the story I told myself, and that we all told ourselves, was, boy, it was so much fun, 10 kids and yada, yada. We had such a great time growing up, and we all love each other so much, and we're such a funny crowd. And when I got sober and started inventorying, it's like, oh no, there was a lot of bad stuff that went on, a lot of raging in the house, and, corporal punishment with, at the end of my dad's belt, and being terrorized by my older siblings at different points, and a a constant competition, even if it was to get in the next joke at the dinner table, So, and just a lot of the other kids that have been very troubled, and kind of really looking at that and what happened for them, and how their reaction to the same situation took them in another deadly direction, and so getting sober and realizing that, and then having my relationships change in the family, and not always falling back into that role that I had as the middle child, and it's changed a lot over the years. And at this point in my life, I'll tell you, yes, COVID has been a big deal for me personally. The 5 years before that has been a huge deal. And everything that's come out of the last presidency and the feelings it's brought up for me and rifts in my family has been very difficult. There was a time, a year ago and just after where, when things, we have these group texts. We promised, my parents passed away. My mom had dementia, sick for a very long time. She passed away, I guess it's been about 10 years ago now. And my dad passed from major heart failure like 3 months later. So when that happened, the kids, we all got together and we talked about, we're going to get together once a year at least, and see each other, whether it's just the siblings or we have our kids too. It's like, okay. So this last year during COVID, I said, no, we're not doing it. I don't feel safe. And everyone's like, yeah, you're right. It's coming up now at the end of this month where I have to see everybody. I don't have to, but I've committed to do that. And I'm, concerned about it because, it's interesting because I knew that some of my brothers were Republican and I am not. But then, one of my sisters too, and that, they still supported Trump the second election. And I'm sorry, I'm trying not to be political, but it was just like, what? It's just so shocking to me. And finding out some of, and then looking back and it's like, oh, they were kind of like this and then this. And it's just, it's been really tough. And I've got, one of my brother and a nephew are both LAPD. So there's been a lot of interesting discussions. And, there was a time last summer where I was, it's like my wife is Black, my kids are Mexican heritage, and I'm not feeling very safe right now talking to you, continuing this conversation. So I, at one point, was just ready to just say, you know what, F y'all and F y'all this, and I'm out of here, And my wife's like, you know what, take a step back, think about it. Let's not, let's just don't do that yet. And so now we're getting ready where it's, what's my time like? Okay, I have a little more time. We had, I don't know if, was it a couple of years now ago or a year and a half, we had the Woolsey fire. And where I live in Topanga, the fire came very close to us. And that's in LA. It's in LA if you're not from around here, but it's kind of in the woodsy, the Santa Monica Mountains. But I also was born and raised in the town of Paradise in Northern California, which burned up during that same period. It's just completely gone. So now the siblings have decided that they want to go back to Paradise and just see what's happening. Take a look around, and it's going to be mostly just us siblings, not too many. One spouse, maybe a couple kids. And I'm really like, shit. I really, I'm not looking forward to this. And I'm, I've committed to it. Yeah, I am going to do it. It's all set up, but it's just like, I'm a little scared. I'm going to have to bring a lot of program and calm and an open heart, but also strength and courage, to be myself. And so I guess, and it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I think it'll be fine. But, I'm trying to live these principles and, live these principles and walk that in this life. And, we'll see how this goes, but I can tell I'm really nervous about it. I didn't realize, I've been kind of like, yeah, I'm doing that thing. And yeah, I've got the tickets because I don't want to drive by myself, plane tickets up to Sacramento, and then I'll drive from there with another sister. But, I'm nervous for what I might say. I'm nervous for, I don't want to slam a door, but it might happen. I don't know, so we'll see what happens. I'm going to, my higher power goes with me no matter what. And, but it's just, I guess the other thing for me is that this, like I made mention before of that, having to be the good girl and show a certain face to the world. And, that doesn't happen for me anymore, but I think more than ever, it's important not to just to go along and to be okay with the way things are. So we'll see how that goes, but I'll be doing a lot of, praying and meditating and trying to have an open heart and also be strong in who I am, So I think I could probably say that like 20 more times and I'll still be nervous right now. So, but the life is really great. And I'm glad I have, I'm meeting with my sponsors meeting is happening next Sunday. And that's right before I'll be going. So that's good. And, but I remember the first holiday home, the first sober holiday, and being so scared and just so scared that I was going to drink, or how was I going to handle my family. And I hadn't even gotten into, my fourth step that deep to know there was all that gook, I was just like, how am I going to handle it when they're all drinking and I want to drink and I'm not going to drink. But what if, so I brought like all of my literature packed in my suitcase and that first holiday season, was, just closing myself off in a back room with my big book and reading and calling my sponsor like a few times a day and just getting through it. And, all those firsts in that first year, the first holidays without drinking, the first, new job and not drinking over it, everything, no matter what we're going through, if you just don't drink and use, it changes, everything changes. What you're feeling today what you're feeling right now, what I'm feeling right now is going to change 5 minutes after I'm off the Zoom. What I'm feeling, it's like, I used to live in kind of a floating anxiety all the time. I clearly remember like so many times driving around LA, driving to my job and trying to talk myself off a ledge or what excuse am I going to use today for this thing I didn't do yesterday at my job that was due last week. And it's just like all this constant just a cloud of anxiety around me, floating through me. And, it's like, wow, to not live with that anymore. I still remember that so clearly. And I'm so grateful I'm not living in that. And the way you get rid of that is being honest, and showing up for yourself and for other people. And, when I was not newly sober, even like that 15 years sober, 20 years sober, or no, it was a little before 20 years, because I remember there was a story, not a story going around, it really happened. There were a couple of women in kind of periphery of the people I knew that had, like, one had 20 years and one had 22 years. And it was like, did you hear they went out? They went out after 20 years, and it's like, holy crap, you're kidding me. And just my stomach would drop and I would just be so scared. Like, how did it happen? What happened? Because you want to know, you want to like do a diagnostic. How did it happen that they went out after 20 years? And the first thing, people would say, they stopped going to meetings. They didn't go to meetings. And now, as I've gotten a little longer in the tooth in my sobriety, it's like, I don't feel you have to be in a meeting every week or, to stay sober. I think it's, for me, when I get into slippery places, it's when I'm not being honest with myself and with others around me. For me, it always gets back to the honesty. When I find myself, again, kind of slipping into wanting to look like I have it together, or wanting to look like I know things that I kind of guess at, but I don't necessarily know them. It's like wanting to put on that good face. When I find myself becoming invested in that, that's when I start feeling, a little uncomfortable in my skin. And then that would lead to a slippery place, for the first 20, it's even been longer than that, because I'm 33 years sober now. I'll be 34 in August. It was only like 5 years ago that I stopped having drinking dreams, when you wake up and you, oh my God. My most common one is that I'd be having a little wine and go like, have I been doing this the whole time? It's just like, I guess maybe I have. Well, whatever, and it would be like, at least once a month I'd have one of those dreams, so hey, it takes what it takes. But things are really good. I'll tell you what'll bring you to your knees very quickly is having kids. Crazy things can happen, but it's part of life. And I have found for myself that I have to be willing to change, be willing to open up to a new idea, maybe a new way of doing things, and to try to maintain that honesty as I'm walking through it. And, no matter what is going on, it will pass. And I may not know the solution today, but it will come. It'll even if it's like all of a sudden I'm just in it and go, oh, this is the solution. Okay, this is where I'm going along now. I don't have to figure things out. I really don't. And every day is new in that way. And this has been a tough time. I'm out of time, but you know what? Just keep talking. For me, when I just keep talking about how I'm feeling and being honest about the struggles and the good stuff too, it all just works out. It really does. I really appreciate you all being here, and thank you guys for arranging these slams. This is fantastic. I love this. Thank you very much.